people think like, oh, because you're having, relations on camera, that when you come home, you don't want it. And I'm like, it's the exact opposite. And also for me, I always refer to my drive as a Pringles can, kind of like once I pop, I can't stop. So if I'm even slightly penetrated, I'm like, okay, now I remember what that feels like. It feels really nice. And I would like to do that again and again and again and again. So if anything, I feel like it only ramps me up.
Bad decisions. Bad decisions. Bad decisions.
Welcome back to the Bad Decisions podcast, where we lead not with celebrity, but with story. I'm your host, Scott Nathan. My next guest is a fellow Midwesterner who succeeded in working both sides of Mulholland Drive. She's a successful comedian. She's the host of the Funny, Sexy, Raw podcast, and she's also an accomplished adult performer. Welcome, Silvia Saige.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me, Scott. I appreciate it. It's good to see you again, even if it's just virtually.
It's always good to see you. Yeah. It's usually just in 2D though, sadly. Let's start with origin stories from the beginning. You grew up in Kansas City. What was your life like growing up?
Oh my gosh. So I grew up in a really small town. I feel like that's a pretty common story from people who fled to Los Angeles. My high school was quite literally in the middle of a cow field. So it was just super small town atmosphere. And I knew that was not the place for me. I knew as soon as I graduated high school, I wanted out immediately. So yeah, just a very small town mindset, which was not my mindset.
Yeah, same. I grew up in a suburb north of Chicago in Illinois, where it was just very regimented and everybody was on very ordinary life paths. And I'll never forget the first time we came on a family trip to California, where we did first to San Francisco and then the drive down the PCH and then into LA. And I remember us driving up Sunset Boulevard, me being in the back seat of this rented Lincoln Continental, raising my hand. And I was like, excuse me, why don't we live here? It's like warm in the winter. And my parents knew at that moment, someday they would lose me to California.
I said the same thing. In fact, my dad and my brother and I, we did that same journey. We went from the Midwest up the coast and came down to PCH. And I said the same thing. I was like, why did we stop in the Midwest? Like, go west. That's what they all say. Go west, young man.
Yeah, we're like 49ers. We're like Gold Rush people, just a different generation.
Yeah.
So you worked in medicine. I read you worked as an X-ray technician before you were a comic, before you were a corn star. Walk us through that journey, if you would.
Yeah. So right out of high school, I did not take anything seriously. I knew I wasn't meant for super big things, I guess. I was always like an A-B student. So right out of college, I went to a community college and I ended up getting kicked out of community college. That is possible. And then I took about a year off. And then I think because I was in the Midwest and it was something you were supposed to do, I went to like a technical school. And actually, it's not even a school any longer, if that tells you how like accredited it was. But it was accredited at the time. I did get my degree as an X-ray tech, but it was just a 2-year little program that I did. And then got right out. I started working for chiropractors. I worked in 3 different chiropractic offices. And then I actually worked for Kansas City Cardiology for a few years, where I was a doctor's assistant and did stress testing and stuff like that. And for a brief period, I actually worked in the Chiefs training facility as their X-ray technician there. So it was an interesting time. But I definitely was doing what I thought I should be doing and not anything along the lines of what I wanted to be doing.
Got you. So was it comedy that brought you to LA, or was it just needing to get out of Kansas City?
Yeah, so it initially was comedy. Corn had made zero entrances into my Corn had made zero interest into my brain at all. I'd kind of been doing a little bit of stand-up comedy in Kansas City, but when I say that, I really just mean going to open mics and little artist nights or whatever at clubs. It wasn't anything big. I was never doing comedy clubs, but I found such therapy out of it. And I really, really enjoyed the positive feedback that I was getting from doing stand up. So I knew it was something I wanted to pursue. So that was the initial reason for coming to LA, was to pursue stand up comedy. But I actually didn't do any stand up in LA for the first 6 months to a year that I was here. I actually moved to Vegas because I was so poor and I was literally living out of my car in Los Angeles towards the end, that I had to move to Vegas to kind of figure things out. And that's actually where my comedy career started, was doing comedy clubs in Vegas and then getting recognized and brought to LA. So it was definitely not an easy venture coming to LA and just breaking right into comedy, which is what I thought was going to happen.
Isn't that funny? Life, John Lennon said, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans.
Yes.
And for me, I've always been a reverse manifester. Whatever I don't want will come into my life sure as the sun will rise. I never wanted to be an actor when I moved here. I didn't even really like having actors as friends, a few. And then a woman starts stalking me at parties and begging me to join her agency as a commercial actor. And I told her no 3 times. And then finally I just said, she goes, "You'll make a ton of money and you'll get health insurance. I promise you." And I go, "Hold on a minute. Did you just say health insurance?" And she's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah." So I end up, because I don't care about acting, I ended up booking 40 national network commercials right out of the
Wow.
gate, just one after another. And my friends who went to Juilliard and NYU, who were like real actors, couldn't get arrested. And I think there's an interesting thing about that dynamic of wanting something too badly, because that will kill you.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Again, same thing for me. I had no plan in my brain of ever getting into porn and corn. God, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Adult. We'll say that. I had no plan in getting into adult. It was out of, honestly, pure brokenness. And a friend who was already working in the industry. She didn't even know I was going to do it. She went to set one day and left her agent's card. And I was like, let me just see if I can make one movie here, 2 movies there, and just kind of slide under the radar and have enough money to do comedy. That was my initial entrance, as I was like, I'll just do it enough to pay my bills and be able to do comedy at night. And that was my whole plan. And then it turned into a more than decade long career.
Well, tell me about your first day on set. What was that like emotionally, physically, all of it? Because I know a lot of people in your business, as you know, and I love to ask that question because it's always different, but it's always interesting.
Yeah, mine was actually a fantastic experience because it was with my best friend, who is still my best friend to this day. She's no longer in the industry, but she was my entrance. So my first scene was with her and Seth Gamble. And
Mm-hmm.
he was professional. He was so seasoned at that point, and he was so used to working with new girls. So nothing made it feel uncomfortable. I mean, it was a little sketchy just because it was a small production. I think it was only the talent, the director, and a camera guy. That was it. So it was a very, very small thing. And I thought, oh, this seems a little like, I thought there'd be a bigger production. So I think that
Was it
felt
like
a
a
little.
casting kind of scenario, or was there dialogue?
Yeah, it was basically kind of like a casting couch. It was basically like she had already done the casting couch and now she's bringing me in as this new person. But I still played like the stepmom even in day one. And I just remember how offended I was because I was 30, and in the adult world, that means ancient. But in my life, I thought I was still some young, sprightly, 20 something. And they were like, oh, you're going to be the mom. And I was like, oh my God, I'm aged immediately the moment I step in front of a camera. So yeah, that was probably the most difficult thing to realize, is that I was now the old person. But other than that, it was so easy and it was so just welcoming, and it didn't seem off to me. Yeah.
So you weren't nervous just knocking it out in front of strangers? So,
No,
so you
because my friend had already been doing it, and I was like, oh, well, I'm with her. So what could go wrong, you know?
all right. So it felt safe. Okay. And
Yeah.
did you have a history of how do I say this? Do you have a history of being with women prior to this scene?
Not a single one. I don't even think I had kissed a woman prior to being in that scene. Um, and it's certainly something I had to get comfortable with over the years. And I definitely have a more comfortable frame of mind when I'm in those scenarios now, but it was really uncomfortable for me for a long time, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, people don't realize like how big a divide it is between sex and performing. And my introduction to it is I got mixed up with someone who I didn't know was a performer. And then she was very forthright and honest, and she told me that she only did girl scenes and that she'd
Mhm.
never been with a girl off camera, which I could care less either way, and she'd never been with a guy on camera, which back then I cared a
Ooh,
little bit about. I don't care anymore. So I was just like, all right, this works for me. It's fine. It's fine. And it was perfectly good. But I really got to understand how different the world was because she had worked. I remember we would usually only get together on weekends because she was so busy. So
mhm.
Friday night would roll around and I'd be like, "Are you tired? We don't have to do stuff. I can just like cook dinner and we can go to bed early." And she's like, "No, I'm like wound up. I've been having all this fake
Yes.
sex all week and now I need real sex." And I'm like, "Fake
Yes.
sex?" So
Yeah, I tell people
talk
that'll
about your relationship between the two.
Yeah, because people think that people think like, oh, because you're having, relations on camera, that when you come home you don't want it. And I'm like, it's the exact opposite. And also for me, I always refer to my drive as a Pringles can, kind of like once I pop, I can't stop. So if I'm even slightly penetrated, I'm like, okay, now I remember what that feels like. It feels really nice. And I would like to do that again and again and again and again. So, if anything, I feel like it only ramps me up. And the nice thing about working in adult, that especially over the years, is I've learned so much about myself and what I'm into, but I'm so open to learning new things because of the experiences I've had and what I've gained, that when someone new comes to the table, I love having the conversation of like, what are you into? Like, what are your things? Like, let's break into it. I'm totally down to try new things because I find I fall in love with new things all the time. So, I mean, I love the relationship between the two because I feel like I get to learn a lot. I get to drop all the judgments from working in the adult industry, and I get to take it into my real life and bring those things to my actual relationships, and it's really makes it fun. I feel like a lot of the men I'm with are just like mind blown of the conversations I'm having with them even before we get to that point.
Yeah. I don't know how much of an outlier I am, but how difficult is it to date civilians for you?
It is tough. Now, I think it's tough to date anybody when you're working in this industry. And I want to be the first to say that I completely understand how it could be difficult for people.
Sure.
I like to think that when I'm in a relationship, I like to be monogamous, but of course, I don't have a job that allows me to be monogamous, but in my brain, I'm monogamous. So,
I
um,
get it.
yeah, it's a difficult place to be because I don't want my partner going out and meeting other people, and I don't want to go out and meet other people, but in my job, I'm still intimate with others, and it's such a weird draw, and I don't expect anyone to understand how to wrap their brain around it until they've been in it. And that's almost another reason, like, if I am dating somebody, I want them to meet the performers I'm working with. I almost want them to sit in on a session, or get an OnlyFans yourself and join in on the situation, just so you know like what it's like and how there is chemistry, but it's not in an intimate way with people. And it's so hard to explain that to somebody. So it's really, really difficult to date. I find a lot of men think they can handle it. And then when they get into it, they're like, oh, my ego actually cannot handle like my friends or family knowing what you're doing. I think that's more of it, because I think a lot of times they can be okay within themselves, but then they get that outside influence and they're like, man, how could you handle this? And then they're like, oh, you're right, I can't handle that. So
Right,
not
right.
yeah.
Yeah, my father somehow found out about that first one I dated. I don't know how. And she had met my parents numerous times on speakerphone calls in the car, and I had met her parents, and you've worked with her, and but we're not naming names. And and my dad calls me one night. He goes, "Hey, is let's call her Amy." He goes, "Is Amy a corn star?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Oh, really? What's her corn name?" And I said, "Do you want to know, Dad?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Do you really want to know, Dad?" He goes, "Yeah, tell me." I said, "I'll tell you on your deathbed. You're not watching my girlfriend do corn, creep." And he was like, "Why are you being like that?" I'm like, "There's no way. I don't want that image in my head of you looking her up. No."
Yeah, good on you. Good on you. I like that.
It's a
Yeah.
bridge too far. It's hard to go too far with me, but that was too far.
Yeah. I get that.
What do you
Yeah.
like more, performing or sex?
Mm. Well, performing on a good night when I've had a great show, that is my preference. But if I'm comparing all performances of being on stage to all performances in adult, probably adult, just because I think it's so much harder on my ego when I crash and fail on a stage than it is if I crash and fail on a set, because I'm like, oh, well, I've got 6,000 movies, take your pick from another one, but I don't have
That's
6,000.
And comedy is brutal. Like, I know some big famous comics, and they still bomb. And I've been at midnight at the Comedy Store and seen Chappelle bomb. I've seen Louis C.K. bomb because they're all trying out their new stuff. And some,
Right.
it's like popcorn in the pan. Some pop, some don't.
Mm-hmm.
And it really takes because I've never done stand up per se, but I've started to dip my toe in doing these like storytelling events. And
Yeah.
I was really panic stricken before, when I did my Barnes and Noble event was an evening of me telling stories, and there were 300 people there, and I'm peeking out from the back going, I need to run out the back door. Oh, we're on the third floor. There is no back door. I can't escape.
Look
And
out the window. No.
I remember I was really nervous. And the night before, I went to my friend who know's comedy club, and Jeff Ross was there. And so she says, Jeff, Scott's really nervous about going on getting up in front of a few hundred people. And Jeff goes, just fuck around. And I said, that's it? That's your advice? He goes, yeah, that's all any of us ever do. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it goes tits up. It doesn't matter. Just go F around. So
Yeah.
so honestly, I had Jeff Ross's little voice and tiny but brilliant bit of advice in my head, and I went out there and I was just like panicking, and then they were like, "Please welcome Scott Nathan," and I just went out there and it was just me, like I am at a dinner party at anywhere else. I just let it fly, and I was like, okay, I gave it all that power over me for nothing.
Yeah, and it does. It takes a hold of you. I mean, I always say, like, I could not have to go to the bathroom at all. And as soon as they go, Sylvia, you're next, I'm like, oh my God. Well, now I have to shit. Like, I'm like, I'm so nervous. Like, okay. And in my head, I'm like, you got this. Like, you know exactly what you're about to do out there. But it's still, there's just so much pressure of performing. And for me, I always think they're going to hate me. They're going to hate me. They're going to hate me.
Because
I
that's
got to
humans.
that.
Yeah, like everybody has self-doubt.
Yeah.
Unless you're a completely disconnected crazy person, of which they're out there, but most
There.
intelligent people have very rational fears. Even hugely accomplished, hugely famous people have imposter syndrome. um
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. I was a big comedy fan as a kid, and this was back, I'm dating myself, but I used to buy comedy albums on vinyl, like
Oh,
George
yeah.
Carlin, Richard Pryor, Steve Martin,
Yeah.
Cheech and Chong, and I loved these comedy records, and I'd have these big, giant Cos headphones, and I'd listen to them over and over again, and they were Joan Rivers, and they were sort of the arbiters of my culture. It was like that and Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath records, but like, who were your
Yeah. Oh,
comedy icons growing up?
George Carlin, for sure. That's the name I always bring up when somebody asks. I just remember me and my dad and my brother just sitting around watching George Carlin, and again, I had as a kid, I never ever thought about being a as a kid, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I mean, for years, I would tell everybody I was going to law school out of high school. I was not smart enough for that, but that was my intention. Um, but I never in a million years thought comedy, but I just remember sitting around watching him and I loved his honesty in his comedy and his in your face style of just telling you the truth, but making it something that even though we might be in a shit ball of fire, we're going to bring some laughter to it, you know? And that's what I absolutely love. And honestly, that's truly what I think I do in my comedy is just tell my story, and it's not pretty, you know, and I know people are going to judge me for it, but I just like to tell it as it is and give people information straight, you know, and I love that aspect.
So, let's see. Hold on. It's funny. Leading back to corn. I was a guest recently on a enormously successful podcast with millions of weekly visitors, and these two women tried to ambush me, and they're like, "We read your book. We watch your TikToks. You know a lot of people in corn. What?" They're like, "We support S workers," and I'm like, here it comes, and they go, "But," and
Mm.
as we all know, the word "but" means disregard the previous statement.
Hmm.
And they said, "But what is it that you like about adult performers?" And I said, "Is that a real question? I can't tell if you're kidding right now." And she goes, "No, I really want to know." And I'm like, "What's not to love about them? They're hot, they're rich, they're amazing at sex, and they all, without exception, have amazing stories, which is everything I like in a person."
Yeah,
And she goes,
it's
and they just go, "Oh." And then I got one over on them so well that they edited it out of the episode.
well, I'll tell you why. It's because everyone needs to feel like they're better than someone. Everyone does, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot of people, women in particular, will look at a porn star and have the same awful mentality that the patriarchy has forced you to have of a woman who's had a lot of sex is somehow worthless and used up. And it's so frustrating to me because again, exactly what you said is how I feel. I'm like, well, we are incredibly, you know, financially independent women. We're the safest group of sexually active humans you will find.
100%.
And we're non-judgmental people. We're extremely welcoming to everyone. And all we want to do is take care of people. And we can because financially we're ruining everybody else, you know? So I just think that it is especially when you get into the people who have been around for decades, the Milfs in the industry, these aren't dumb women. These are mostly college educated women who have come into the adult world later in life after trying other things in life. I know a lot of people who have, you know, like Cherie DeVille has master's degrees. You know, it's like it wasn't for lack of having an education or lack of the ability to do other things. I think a lot of times we were just like, oh, this is a better means to an end. I can make in 1 month what I would be hopeful to make in a year as an x-ray technician with my college degree. You know, so it's just so life changing and you get to take over your own sexuality and own it. I think it's very empowering, but not a lot of people will see it that way, and it's very disheartening because it does. I don't think anything about your sexuality changes who you are as a person, whether
Agreed.
you're
Agreed.
or having sex with 1,000 people a week, you know, like it's not changing your soul and who you are as a person.
Yeah. Let me see. What else did I want to ask you? I once had a friend who was a performer, a young performer who became a mega escort. And I asked her what that's like going into, because this is very different than a set. This is walking into a hotel room with someone you don't know that you got through a booking agent that you may or may not trust. And she had an
Mm-hmm.
interesting take on it. She said, Scott, it's like being a professional killer. I go, how's that? And she goes, at first it's horrifying and shocking and just jarring to your system. She's like, but after the first few times, you just put them in the crosshairs, you pull the trigger, and you run off with the bag full of money.
Yeah, honestly, that's adult work in general. Like, of course, like, I mean, none of us came in as virgin. I don't think anybody came in as virgin. They might have. I don't know. That's weird to me, but to each their own. It's not like we were
There've
coming
been
and
a
doing,
few.
yeah, but it's not like we were coming and doing something we had never done before, you know? So it is something that even though typically you were with, a partner, but even for me, I was kind of slutty way before I got into adult. So, I mean, I would go out in my 20s with the pure intention of going home with the hottest guy in the bar, whatever that the hottest guy in the bar happened to be, like I was, I might have picked a four if he was the best option in the bar, like I was very much into one night stands. I would never do a one night stand now because I'm terrified of what's out there because now I live in a totally different world of testing. But back in the day, this was something I was so used to. So for me, when I went to a porn set and you're introducing me to these new people, I'm like, okay, this is like meeting somebody in a bar, but I'm not drunk. So the sex is hopefully going to be a little bit better. And these people are pedigrees. They're coming with tests to make sure that they're safe to work with, So for me, it was kind of an upgrade getting
Look, that's
into
how
adult.
this is how I am, and this is how I learned from my friends in adult. And this has not gone over well much in the past few years. But like, I'll be on a second date with someone, and they'll be like, "So are you clean?" I said, "Oh, I'm always tested." And they're like,
Yes.
"Can you prove it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, here's a PDF on my phone." And they're like, "You just carry this on your phone? Why?" And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Same reason I carry a copy of my passport on my phone. It's
Yeah.
necessary. It's for full transparency." And they're like,
Right.
and they're like, "Where do you go get this done?" And I'm like, "Well, there's these two places. There's talent testing and whatever CET." And they were
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, "You go all the way to the valley for these places?" I was like, "Yeah, but they're really
Yeah.
quick. They're not cheap,
Yeah.
but they're quick." And they were
For
like, and I'll be like,
it's great.
I was like, "Let's just start fresh. Let's both go. I'll pay for it, and then we'll get on with it." And they're like, "You're a little too comfortable with this whole business part of it." And I'm like, "It's not a business part of it. It's a safety part of it."
People get so offended when you ask them to test. It's crazy because I do the same thing on a first date. If I think I'm into this person and there's going to be a second date, I say, you might as well go ahead and get tested before I see you again. And I'm like, if you want to go together, I'm totally fine with that if you're not comfortable, or I'll give you the address of where to go and I'll tell you what to order. Because going to testing it, talent testing or CET is like ordering off of a McDonald's menu. You're like, I'd like a full panel with also an oral swab and a backdoor swab, or I'd take an MGM as well, and maybe a shot of B vitamins. Like it's really so simple. And you're right, it's in and out in 10 minutes, but I'm the
I love
same
going in
way.
there just to run into everyone
Yeah.
because it's always like, "Oh, hey, how have you been?" It's like a singles
But
bar.
it's how many people get mad at that. They're like, oh, you need me to get tested, I should be worried about you. I'm like, no, you shouldn't, because I've got my test. So I'm like, when was the last time you were tested? And most of them it's 6 months to a year, or they don't remember the last time they got tested. And I'm like, okay, this is why we're doing this. So
Yeah, yeah. I went into talent testing with a performer friend who had taken a break, and so we just made it as part of our errands for the day. And I run into Speaks, and I hadn't seen him in a while. Now, Speaks, to everyone out there, is like the agent of all agents, or certainly
Mhm.
one of the big ones. And I go, "Speaks, you look great. You lost so much weight." He goes, "Yeah, yeah. I had to help." I can't remember if he said he had cancer or heart attack or whatever. What
Yeah, he did
was it?
have
Cancer?
cancer. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I didn't know it. I didn't know it. I had to make a joke out of it. I go, "Well, it really suits you. You look amazing." Because I had to just sort of commit to the compliment.
Yeah.
But
I love that.
like, I think back to when Boogie Nights was getting made. This is going way back. And I was just because I had spent some time around the adult business, and I was like, "Please don't F this up." And they handled it beautifully, I thought, because it was sort of like they used the Godfather prototype. They didn't make it about adult. They made it about family, which is what The Godfather was about, which Boogie Nights was about. And what I love about the adult industry is people are really there for each other. They're really, I think, they know they're somewhat outcast in certain elements of polite society, and they really, really take care of each other. And there's a lot of love and a lot of loyalty there.
That is so true. I find that my adult family is what I consider to be my most important family, because I'm like, these people they get it. And I love my family to death, my real family, but not all of them get it, and some of them do, and they're very understanding and love me regardless. But I do feel outcast by the world and by a good portion of my family. So it's really nice to have that support group of like, hey, we're in this together and we know we're not bad people, like we understand what we're doing here. And at the end of the day, we are just actors, making performances for people, and performances that billions of people are requesting to see all the time, So if
Yeah,
we're
I
not
think
doing it, who is?
look, it's always been bigger than Hollywood. I think the only thing that might top it now financially might be the video game industry, but they're always kind of right up there. But it's like you're gonna bag
Mhm.
on it, you're watching it, and if you're not watching it, everyone around you is watching, because it wouldn't be a $1 trillion industry if people weren't into it.
Yep.
Which makes me
So true.
wonder, are we the only animal that likes watching our own kind do it, or do you think other animals might be voyeuristic too?
Ooh, what a great question. I don't know. I'd like
Because
to think that other animals also like to watch, but I don't know.
yeah, it's when you think about it, it's kind of a strange thing.
Yeah.
And and for me, once I've gotten to know someone, I don't watch their videos anymore, because it kind of, you know what I mean? It's like church and state.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
I will
so
say,
go
I
ahead.
will say I've seen animals in public doing it. So I think they have to be some sort of voyeurist, because they're not like finding a little dark cave, So, I mean, maybe they're okay with it. Maybe they're into it.
Tell me, since you are a veteran who's been at it quite a while, tell me what the transition was like from the studio only era to the OnlyFans creator era.
Oh gosh. Well, for me, it's been fantastic.
Most, yeah.
I loved working in adult, and I still like working in adult, and I'll go to set, maybe 6 to 8 times a year now. But I've had great success with OnlyFans, and I think a lot of the girls who are extremely hard workers and are, not doing OnlyFans just because it's easy. We're doing OnlyFans because we realize the potential in it, and that it's not going to be here forever. So make what you can when you can. But I also was very, very fortunate that I had a Hulu documentary come out basically as soon as COVID hit. On Hulu, it was called Selling Sexy, but it was about OnlyFans. And I was the only female adult actor that they featured in that series. So my numbers just skyrocketed when that came out. And it just so happened because everybody's at home during COVID. It was just like, I mean, just compounded on top of each other for the point where I was like changed my life completely. So since that coming out, I mean, obviously my numbers fluctuate, but it made it to where I never really have to leave my house. I work from home 90% of the time. I hire other people to come over and shoot with me, but I mean, it changed everything for me. Everything.
Yeah. It's a lot of people, and what I tell a lot of the, I try to be a good advisor, not because I'm such a wise sage or anything, but because I know so many successful people at it, that I just sort of extract what works and what doesn't. And like anything else, you kind of get out what you put in. The people that are making, I have one performer friend who makes $300,000 a month, but you know what? She's not running an OnlyFans. She's running a studio. She has hair and
Uh-huh.
makeup and wardrobe and performers, and is doing the same thing that the studios do. She's just doing it herself.
Yep. And you're doing it from the comfort of your own home. And a lot of times on set, and I don't want anyone to think I'm speaking ill on the adult industry, but a lot of times on set, it's, you're following a script, and the script may not always be something I'm super comfortable with, not something I would do in my normal life because I'm considered MILF. I'm 41 now. So it was different when I got in at 30 and I was working with 22-year-olds, but Now at 41, when they try to couple me with a 22, 23, 24-year-old, I don't feel right about it, you know? And I don't like some of the scripts that they're setting in that, you know, oh, I'm just waiting for this person to get home from college, you know? That makes me uncomfortable. So when I'm shooting at home, I'm not shooting any of that stuff, sorry. I'm shooting stuff that makes me the sexy girl next door, makes me feel like I'm the desirable one instead of me desiring after some young person, you know? So the style of things I get to create are things that are actually a turn on to me now. And that's also so nice.
Did you know that I'm banned for life from OFans?
No. What did you
I'll t-
do?
I've never told this story before, but what the hell? We're all dead soon anyway. So, so I was seeing this performer at the beginning of COVID, or well, for months leading up to that, and then COVID hit. She was like, "Oh my God, what are we gonna do? You can't shoot, I can't shoot. We are effed." And I said, "We're not effed. We'll think of something." So Zoom was brand new, so I just started having meetings on Zoom. So I call her and I said, "Hey, do you know what a Zoom chat is?" She goes, "No, I don't know what that is." And I said, "It's sort of like Skype is, you know. I have an idea. Let's create a genre of corn around quarantine." And she was just like, "All right, what do you want out of it?" And I said, "I'll tell you what. I'll do all the work. We both together know everybody." I was like, "I'll book all the performers. I'll get the account. I'll produce it." And then I'll give all you performers like a 3-week embargo period to make all your money, and then just let me throw it up on mine to see if I get some spillover on the tag, right? And these girls were making $40,000-$50,000 a month, and I was getting a spillover of $3,000 or $4,000 a month, which was not so bad for not really doing anything except editing some clips, making some GIFs, cutting some trailers, and
Yeah.
sweetening video and audio. So if one thing I've ever been good at in my life, it's getting press. So I was just like, how can I get the mainstream to write about this to get us traffic? So, what if you're pitching Esquire or Rolling Stone, they're going to respond to different headlines, and journalists are lazy. So you don't give someone a press release, you give them a finished article. So I send the desk at Esquire and Rolling Stone how the adult industry is not only surviving but thriving during COVID.
It's
And and
true.
and it exploded. So the first one we did was with 4 A+ list performers, all women, just all taking care of themselves on camera, and it was funny. And then she's like, "What do we do next? How are we going to make money?" I'm like, "How are we going to? What we're doing next is never taking our foot off the gas pedal till it's over. We're going to keep doing
Right.
these and doing these and doing these until nobody wants to see them anymore." And then one day I get a message from this lady at OnlyFans, and I shouldn't have been as sarcastic as I was. And she says, "I'm looking at your account, and you have 41 A-list adult performers on your channel, and we've never heard of you." And I should have explained it, but instead I said, "Well, respectfully, I've never heard of you either." I said, "But I have your forms. I have your 2257s, whatever they're called. I have the bunny ears with the IDs. I've done all of my paperwork. It's in order." And they were like, "Well, we have a new release now, and you're going to have to. It sounds sketchy. We're going to need you to have the performers refill them out all over again." And I said,
God.
"Do you know how hard it is to? I don't think I could get 5 adult performers to wrangle them to get them to do paperwork for something they've already made their money on. This is unreasonable." Um, so I said, "I'll make you a deal, oh fans." I said, I don't really do that anymore. That was like a one-time deal. But I still like to support my friends. Why don't you just take down all the videos that you think are sus and let me keep my account?" And they're like, "Nope, you're banned for life." So I'm like, "All right."
Wow. I'm so sorry. That sucks.
Honestly, it's not the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Of course, I can't follow my friends, but it's not like taking away my TikTok that I actually really make money from.
Yeah, they get really sensitive on OF with a lot of things. I just had somebody who's like a really long-term follower of mine get kicked off because he used the language, and he didn't use it in like a negative way, but he used language that they didn't like. He said, like, I'll love you till I die. And they just saw the word die and they said, he's gone. So they thought he was like using it in a threatening way, but he was using it in the complete opposite way, but it didn't matter to them. Their bot caught the word and kicked him off of OF.
Isn't it? It's ridiculous. I'm on a 10-day live ban from TikTok for hate speech, and
What'd you say?
all we were talking about, I was like, what does everybody think about what's going on with Diddy? And then
Uh-huh.
and I was just trying to be funny about it. I was just like, here's the reason I'm a law-abiding citizen. The reason I'm never going to end up going out like Diddy isn't because I don't like, naughty stuff. It's because I like hotel robes and bathtubs and Pellegrino and really good chocolate and king size beds so much more than I like naughty time, that I'm just going to be a law abiding citizen because I've seen the inside of a jail cell and I didn't like it. That's all I said. Then all of a sudden it went, restriction, you're banned until the 30th for
That's
hate speech.
crazy.
How's that hate speech?
Can you not like go and fight it?
Yeah, I appealed it, and then I was probably a bot that reviewed it and said, no, you're still effed. And
That's
sometimes
crazy.
they'll get overturned, but I was just like, how is that hate speech talking about topical things? So that's why
Yeah.
I'm kind of tired of that whole commie channel, and that's why I'm leaning more into YouTube, which takes us to where we are now.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not
You
so sensitive. Yeah.
Mhm.
They pay better. They don't pressure you to sell gadgets,
True. Although I buy a lot of those gadgets. I got a lot of random stuff. This is one of those TikTok gadgets I bought right here.
Oh, I've seen that one. Yeah.
Don't buy it.
But
I don't suggest
But do they
I don't.
pester you with 5 emails a day to sell stuff? Because they
No.
do with me.
No, just because of who I am, they don't want me selling things for them.
I know, but who would want this face selling anything either? But sure enough, they do, and it's always like idiotic. They're like, will you sell this lip gloss?" And I'm like, "Do I look like I could sell lip gloss?" So I've just
I
like
mean,
unsubscribed from all of their emails, and
yeah,
they still keep coming. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm
We'll
not
send them my way,
QVC.
but I don't think they want to work with me.
Well, I think you're doing just fine. So tell me what's next for you. What's on the horizon comedy wise?
Gosh, so much actually. I've got a headlining gig coming up June 15th, I think, and then I'm actually writing a new comedy special with my writing coach at the moment. And I say writing coach, people think she's helping me write. She is not. I'm writing a series. So she's helping me with the series. And as we were writing the series, she says, you also have to write a novel and a comedy special. And now I had written a comedy special and I did a 45-minute special. But after seeing the taping, I was like, this is not the product I want to put out. So now I'm working on a new hour that I'm going to put together and try and release
Mhm.
later this year. So I'm going to self produce.
That's amazing. So are you doing road gigs? Are you local, Vegas?
I am not doing any road gigs. I am, until road gigs are bringing in more money than I'm spending traveling there, I'm not doing it. But well, that's
Right.
not true. I have a road gig in Kansas City with comedian Nicole Birch, if you're familiar with her.
I am,
But
yeah.
I'm from Kansas City and so is she. So when she offered me to do the show in Kansas City, I was like, with her, yes. But outside of that, I'm certainly not doing any traveling right now. I just feel like, I mean, with comedy, they pay so little, and your girl does not travel less than first class, and I don't stay in less than 4-star hotels. So, and they're not covering that. They give you like $500 for your travel, and I'm like, okay, great, that'll be my rental car, So it's like, it doesn't make sense for me to go on the road. I'm spending more than I'm making, so until that reverses, I'll be sitting my ass in Los Angeles doing comedy.
Got it. So did you say June 15th?
Yeah, June 15th. Yes.
Where's that? What's the venue?
That it's actually a venue I haven't done before. It's called I'd have to go over to my calendar, but I think it's called the Best Comedy Club Near You. Does that
Okay.
sound familiar? Have you done
I
that? Or
no, I don't know. I don't know it, but
it's on Melrose, but
well,
I don't know. So
well, everybody watch Sylvia's social media for that data
yeah,
if you're local. I saw you've
yeah.
been doing videos with Cat C.
Yes, yeah. We're doing a little bit. I think I just had the conversation with her. I'm not gonna keep those up. I love Kat, but I just felt like it was drawing a little bit too much off of what I already do. But her and I are
Right.
gonna work on some other projects. So
Yeah, I haven't known her that long, but I met her. Someone brought her to some of my book signing events, and I
oh
think maybe we had the same publicist in common or something. But I just thought she was nice and funny.
yeah, she's very sweet. Yeah. So we are just gonna work on some other projects, but that one I'm gonna put a halt on for now. So
Fair. All
yeah.
right. So where can everyone follow you?
You can follow me on Instagram at the Silvia Saige, and that's SilviaSaige, or on YouTube. My podcast is called Sexy Funny Raw, or you can also find me, of course, on OnlyFans.
The Bad Decisions podcast was produced by Brock Workman of Her Dat Entertainment. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll never miss an episode. My book, The Big Book of Bad Decisions, is available for purchase wherever books are sold. A special thanks to today's guest, Silvia Saige, for joining me today. I'm your host, Scott Nathan. Thanks for listening.
A Huda Media Production.